You're listening to the Community Pulse, a podcast about developer relations, community management, and all things tech advocacy. Let's see what our hosts are chatting about this episode.
One of the most difficult parts of managing a community is ensuring everyone adheres to a universally acceptable system of behavior. With events, there is generally a code of conduct that makes it clear what behaviors are acceptable, what behaviors aren't, and the consequences of operating outside of those rules. Sometimes it falls on an individual or a team to handle this. And in the online world, today, we'll be talking about moderation with a guest who knows exactly how it works. But first, let's hear a message from our sponsor.
The world's best software teams use CircleCI to deliver quality code with confidence. As the largest continuous integration and delivery platform, CircleCI empowers engineers to seamlessly take ideas to execution at scale. The CircleCI platform is optimized for developer productivity, speed, and confidence. CircleCI understands how engineering teams work and how their code runs. Companies like Intuit, Apple, and Spotify use CircleCI to improve productivity, release better products, and get to market faster. Visit communitypulse.io/CircleCI to get started.
Hey everybody. Before getting into it, we'd like to give you a content warning. Some of the topics we discuss may include conversations around issues of violence, mental health, or other triggering behaviors or activities. Please be aware and listen at your comfort level. And now let me hand it over to SJ to get us started.
Thanks so much, PJ. Hey everyone, we're super excited to have Rosie Sherry with us today. I would love to hand it over to her to introduce herself, and then we'll get started.
Hey, thank you, everyone. I'm Rosie. I call myself a community builder. Previously, I bootstrapped my own community-driven company, Ministry of Testing. And then after that, I was leading the community over at Indie Hackers. And more recently, I'm working with Orbit as a community lead.
Thank you so much, Rosie. What a storied background in community. Lots of different things to pull on. We're really excited to dive in. So I think that, this topic of moderation is so key to community. We kind of want to start with, the beginning of the process. Moderation itself it's generally used to handle behaviors within a community. In all y'all's opinion, we'll start with you, Rosie. What are some of the steps that we can take to, gain widespread adoption as moderation is trying to be rolled out into a community?
It's moderation overall, I think, is really tough, and I think a lot of it depends on the type of community you run or you're part of. Most of my experience is obviously from the communities that I've been responsible for, and I guess my approach has always been have the foundations in place, as in have the best practices of guidelines and codes of conduct. Mostly in the hope that you don't ever really have to use it or point to it, but it's there if you need it. But I prefer to lead by example and creating the space that you want to see and amplifying the goodness and and then trying your best. If there is anything that's not of your liking, then obviously hide it as much as you can to either protect people, but also stamp it out quickly so it doesn't kind of infiltrate even more. And I guess generally with so many types of communities out there, probably it's a huge rabbit hole to go down through, but communities can be such a horrible place, right? And if they're not managed properly, if they're not moderated, and I think it's where the world is now or has been, growing in so many different directions. It's I don't really have direct experience with many of those kind of situations, I guess, but it's definitely one that I would have, aimed to avoid in any community that I run. Is like it fills me with dread and fear of like having, I guess, toxic communities.
Yeah, setting a tone is definitely something that I also subscribe to, making sure that you be an example of what good behavior looks like and how you treat your community members, and hopefully they'll treat you back in the same way. When you have a new member join a community, unfortunately, they don't know the tone, at least not initially. What do you usually do, or what would you advise for new users coming into a community? How do you make sure as a moderator that they are informed of what the rules are and what kind of standard of interaction that you expect?
Yeah, I like to, where possible, I think like being really horrible, I like to try to assume that people mean well. So I guess low scale moderation might be someone's posted in the wrong place, or posted something that they, perhaps is not particularly bad, but it's just not the kind of things we would post. I guess you get a lot of that with like marketing type or self-promotional type stuff. That's probably in my experience, the most rampant kind of moderation challenges is that people come in and they selfishly want to post about themselves, and it's not particularly hateful or toxic in any way. It's just like it damages the environment in other ways. I think it's it depends how. I think a lot of it is first structure the environment so it's obvious for people what to post and where to post. But if they're still posting things that they shouldn't be, and they're new, I like to think rather than saying things out publicly, if you have the means to message them directly to say, hey, this is, I've removed this, or I've done this, and this is why. Or instead of posting this here, you should repost it there. But rather than doing it publicly, I think quite often people mean well, and almost shaming them publicly is, something that can really kind of put them off coming back.
So I think I've seen this a lot in the communities that I'm involved in as well. It seems that kind of the job of the moderator is to make sure that people still feel welcome. They feel like their opinions are taken care of. And like you're saying, you don't publicly shame someone. There's none of that. How could you, how dare you? Why would you? None of that goes on. It's less blame and more hey, maybe you weren't aware, and it's about the awareness. But, that kind of leads into my next question is how do you kind of decide who the moderators are? How do you control there? Because you could have, I've seen situations where there's moderators in their community and they're kind of overzealous and kind of jump and pounce and do that kind of, not even public, but sometimes just kind of aggressive moderation, as opposed to what you're talking about, which seems like more of a learning opportunity. Hey, you probably made a mistake and you didn't know you were supposed to do that here instead of over there. You just be aware of it in the future. And it's more of a my God, what have you done? How do you kind of moderate the moderators?
Yeah, good question. Because I've definitely had situations in the past where I've had help from community members to as moderators, and they end up as you say, being overly harsh or not being as mindful as I would be. Is and sometimes I struggle saying, well, you're being a bit harsh, you shouldn't have said that. And I think in hindsight, I always have regret not saying things as they are. As I wish I could, especially I guess my younger days, I wish I could have been more direct and just saying, look, that's not how we do things. And I do think some moderators get kind of a power, what do you call it? A power,
a power trip.
Yeah, power trip from saying, oh, I've got control of this. I have, I can do what I like, and perhaps not, taking advantage of that, or I just think like the culture, trying to like set a culture tone is so important, and I think definitely like going forward with communities is like being super strict with the things that you do believe in and that you do want to see, and if a moderator is behaving in a power trip kind of way, then crack down on that, and even if necessary, apologize to the people that that the moderator has been in contact with, and because it's such a a big thing. If one experience can really kind of change the perception of someone who is part of the community, and they'll never come back, and even worse than them not coming back is them sharing their negative experiences with others. So it's like moderators are so important, but probably also not appreciated enough for the things they do. And I think overall, like the culture of moderators, quite often they volunteer, or low paid, and if that's the culture of a community that you set, then what do you expect? It's like so many communities survive on free labor, and that's challenging. Because like I don't know the solution to it, but I definitely feel it's a challenge. And when I've built communities in the past, I've always insisted as much as possible that we pay people who help us, or we definitely give back. And even if we're not paying them directly, then we're supporting them in some kind of way, or helping them learn about how to become better moderators, or helping them advance their career, and I just don't think a lot of people have that culture when it comes to what moderators can do.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you brought up is so valid. And one of the struggles I've had in communities and trying to identify, is that first step. How do you even identify who is going to potentially be a successful moderator? And in that case, once you sort of identify them, how do you actually set them up for success? Like, do you train them up on the code of conduct? Is it part of an ambassador program? Like, there's so many different ways to approach identifying who these folks are and how they'll be, hopefully a value add for your kind of cultural experience of your community. So in your experience, is there any sort of like general best practices or, patterns you've noticed in those first stages of identifying who the moderators are? Because I think often we're tempted to kind of go with the squeakiest wheel in the community, and often those folks are not necessarily the folks that we want to be, putting into positions of enforcement for the kinds of communities we want to grow. And so I have personally found that to be a tremendous challenge. So if anyone has any thoughts,
I'd love to jump in on that real quick, because one of the things that I found is I know that a lot of people, it's a troublesome community, we'll say, but like the community that is in a lot of like online forums, a lot of times moderator duties get put to someone who participates the most. So the person who's posting the most or adding the most content or whatever it is. And the default is like, hey, you seem to do a lot around here and you comment a lot of things. We should probably make you a moderator. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are set for moderation. And also someone who participates a lot is almost definitely going to say yes. Whether they know that they're the right fit or they know that they're not aware that they're not the right fit, they're probably going to say yes. And this can often, I think, lead to a negative moderator experience, where they do become kind of those more aggressive, toxic moderators because they believe that the community looks the way that they think it looks, not the way they don't take into account other perspectives in a specific, group of people. So I think that can be troublesome, but that was kind of my 2 cents on the difficulties of finding the right moderators to have as part of a community.
One thing I have found is that at least by the time you sort of identify that your community needs moderation, that's already a good signal for engagement of your community, right? And hopefully in some of the more positive experiences I've had with this, you're able to find, as Mr. Rogers says, you can find the helpers, right? And you can see the folks who are actively going in and like answering questions for folks and being supportive. And you can kind of tell that it's just sort of in their nature. Like that's their jam, is to help other people out. And that's how they engage in community. And I have found those folks especially deserve incentive and like reward, right? Because they're doing such good things. But those folks, even if they don't like participate with the frequency we'd like, they tend to be you know, a better overall add to the experience in terms of like, you know, having the sort of instinct of what to look for and how to support folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, especially about, you know, falling into the trap of whoever's most active. You know, it's something so easy just to think that they would be like the best kind of person. I think also stuff that I like to think about this is like generally in community, but I think it also applies to like moderation, is who are the people that would benefit the most and learn the most from taking on a role of moderation. And if it's not going to be someone who's the most active, for example, is it how can you find those people who are perhaps less active or but are like good empathetic people as well. So it's like maybe people who come from different backgrounds. If we look at like the way the whole world is today, and it's like maybe, you know, thinking about more diversity, it's like people with experience who you know have not had life so easy, they'll naturally be more empathetic towards situations and hopefully be able to deal with like moderation issues with more calm, you would hope. But I think like if the most active person might not benefit as much from moderating, but if you find people who perhaps could learn and grow with the community, then I would, you know, I would hope that, you know, they would stick around longer or have a bit more enthusiasm to take on the role. And sometimes if you try to get people involved who are too busy already, they can quite easily, you know, drop it off their list and not end up being very helpful because they're too busy. So it's like trying to find the people who aren't too busy and who can grow from the experiences is a way to kind of find the win-win between running a community and also for the community moderators.
Yes, also, and if they're oversubscribed, they can burn out also prematurely and just leave the community altogether. And that's also something that's not necessarily an outcome that you want for your community. Moving from like front and center moderation of like looking at posts and all of that, code of conduct is usually what is very actively seen from the user using a community. But there's more that goes on. I was wondering if you could just give your opinion and fill us in on behind the scenes after the code of conduct is put there publicly. What happens in terms of structure and setup for it to really hit home and really be an effective form of moderation for a company?
Yeah, good question. So I guess like I've been my two biggest experiences with communities like indie hackers and Ministry of Testing. The scale between the two has been quite different. So I think when I was at indie hackers, for example, they used to be like, I don't know, like 200, 250 posts a day that would kind of fly through the forum. And I can't remember what it was at Ministry of Testing, but it was probably more like 5 or 10 posts a day that would fly through. So, you know, the scale is different. And I also think like the situation for me was different, as in Ministry of Testing, I was like the founder of the company. So I could like make all, you know, I would just like do stuff and not seek permission. And Indie Hackers is different, you know, owned by Stripe, run by the original founder, Cortland. So, and you know, I was given pretty much like free reign of things. So there was like huge flexibility, but I think the challenges were different. So with Ministry Ministry of Testing, we had discourse, and the moderation functionality was quite mature, and it would catch a lot of typical things. It would stop it, like, posts from even appearing, like from new members, like, all this marketing stuff. It would, and people could report stuff easily. And with Indie Hackers, there was because it's like all custom built, and fairly lean in like the team setup, that there wasn't really much in terms of moderation, like automated kind of moderation. And even until I left, a lot of it was still done manually, and a lot of code was like being like proactively written to stop like spam coming in, and we had like this never ending stream of spam, which was quite interesting to see the variety of it that would come in. But like within the hackers, like I took the philosophy is like, all right, if I can't stop it appearing, I want to get rid of it manually as quickly as I can. So that like basically like every day when I logged in, that was like the first thing I did. I would look for spam and clear it off. And it wasn't a perfect solution, but it was kind of like making do with what I had and what I could do. And I believe that was like making do with what I have. I believe I did the best that I could, and I believe like if I hadn't done that, that would have definitely kind of impacted the community experience.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned spam, because I think spam is kind of one thing. It's actually probably a division of things that need to be moderated in any kind of forum or community thing. But then there's also kind of the more serious situations, which include things like, people threatening suicide or threatening violence against others, or all kinds of harassment. And how do you handle serious situations? Like, is this something where you need to spot it, get the authorities involved? And I mean, this isn't just for Rosie, this is for anybody. Yeah. But like, what do you do when things escalate from like, hey, I don't agree with you, to, hey, I'm literally threatening you?
I'm lucky enough that I've not like had like super serious situations like that. There have been like some mental health kind of situations, and with Ministry of Testing, we had sent some of our staff on like a mental health training course to help them be able to deal with like situations and know what to do or where to send people. I think for me personally, I was like always like, it's like my worst nightmare, like trying to help someone who's in need, right? And I was like, I'm not a professional for that, so I'm trying to direct them to professional services. We try to do that, but I think trying to take that on as like a community manager is really risky, and it's really taxing emotionally, and especially like in professional communities that I've been involved in. It's like I don't think it's what we should really be dealing with, but these situations do come up, and you need to be able to figure out something to do, because if you don't do something, and something happens, it's not that it's your fault, but it's like it's you'll still feel it, right? So,
right.
But
well, it's kind of like whether it's your involvement or not, like there's still impact to you, your team, the people moderating, and things like that.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the best thing you can do? It's like the best thing. I guess. I mean, I'd love to hear what other people say. It's like pointing them or trying your best to put them in touch with professional services that they may need. So, but other than that, for me personally, it's like Ministry of Testing has generally been quite a safe place. I've had only one or two fairly mean things done to me over the years. And Indie Hackers, to be honest, it's like it suffers from a lot of spam, but it doesn't suffer from that like harassment or trolling or anything like that, which has been great. I was really scared, like joining at first, like being surrounded by a bunch of tech. It's very tech focused and very male dominated, and it was actually one of my biggest concerns when joining. Is like, am I going to get harassed as a woman, like leading the community? But I honestly had none of that, so I'm very happy about that.
If I could share my own little experience with like serious threats. I used to work for a moderation company. I was the manager there. We moderated the account or the Twitter account for Walmart. And so I had about, depending on the time of year, up to 90 or so direct reports that would handle all incoming, outcoming for the Twitter account for Walmart. And because these were physical stores, it required a certain level of coordination when we got like a bomb threat or a threat of action or violence, where we would have to basically flag it, make sure we got screenshots and pictures of it, so to prevent it from being deleted, or and to get as much information as possible so we can package that up. Figure out if it was like county, like a municipality, or like statewide or federal type of threat or crime that was being threatened to be committed, and making sure that those authorities were placed in the loop, and then also contacting the physical stores and making sure that they're on alert and understood what was possible to happen. And what's important is also keep in mind that this is extremely America facing. So it might be different depending on if you're more international in types of dealing with these threats of violence. But making sure that the people who would be involved, that all of that was set up before a threat actually comes in, because it's really hard to scramble and get all of those people coordinated without knowing what the playbook is. So we need to know where are the local numbers, who are the local authorities, if a certain kind of threat, who to contact directly instead of funneling through like a phone tree, and to figure that out. So having that at the ready and never having to use it is extremely preferable.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me how many times we've actually mentioned, because I think at the top, Rosie also mentioned that the whole idea behind moderation is hoping to never have to use it. And I know that, like, when it comes to organizing events, your goal with creating a code of conduct, not just events, but kind of any organizational code of conduct, your hope is that this will never get violated. I'll never have to use it. And I think it's interesting. That's kind of how the take on moderation is. But yeah. I think there's like a million more questions we could ask about this, but we are kind of at time. So before we completely run out of time, I think we should get to the most famous part of the show, which is checkouts, which will lighten the mood a little bit, because we totally really made it really heavy right there. So we'll kind of lighten it up with our checkouts. I'll get it started, and then I'll toss it over to SJ, who can toss it to Wesley, and then Rosie, and then I will close us out if that sounds good to everybody. But so my checkout this week is an app called Call of Conduct. And the idea is, events have codes of conduct, but a lot of times there's no reporting structure at all. So this app is built to kind of handle the reporting, so you have some sort of documentation should a code of conduct be violated. And I'm pretty sure it could probably be adapted for moderation to a community forum. But full disclosure, this is an app that I built. So I'm really proud of it, and I'm super excited about it. Just kind of completed. It's still in beta, but you can check it out. And maybe we'll adapt it so that we can actually moderate forums and stuff. And that's my checkout. I'm going to toss it over to SJ.
Thanks, PJ. So my checkout this week is won't have a link, and it won't have like a destination for you to go to. It's more of a concept, and that concept is to take care of yourself. And it's summertime, and we all just came out of a year of intense COVID stuff. And what I'm noticing is a lot of companies are giving folks maybe Friday afternoons off. They're giving folks like maybe an extra break in the summertime. But what that's doing is actually making folks more busy in the days when they're not working. And so busy, in fact, that I did not actually think of a real checkout for today. So my shout out for everyone today is just pick your battles, take some time. Don't let we're in a really weird not post for everyone, but
pre-post
COVID world. And we need to cut ourselves some slack and take a breather. So just remind yourself that it's okay to not be on top of everything. That's my checkout.
Can I just add to that a little bit? If you work at a company that gives you unlimited vacation, take it now.
Take it, and take a lot of it. Take
a ton. If they give you unlimited vacation, take a break. Don't fall into the trap.
Mm-hmm.
Wesley, what you got?
First of all, it's like 100 plus to that. Be kind to yourself. Like, take some time. This is like we're all trying to reintegrate into society in some sort of form of fashion. So be kind with being able to not necessarily do it perfectly. Also, super appropriate checkout, PJ. I'm so happy to hear about Call of Conduct. That looks like an amazing endeavor, and I wish you the best of luck. So.
Super excited.
My checkout is not so serious, and it's an ad that I actually got on Twitter that I thought was hilarious. It's a company called Titanium Buzz. You can find them at titanium-buzz.com, and they make rings. And one of the rings that they make is sponsored by Michelin or endorsed by Michelin, and these are rings that look like tire treads. And so,
wait, these are like rings that you put on your finger. Rings
you put on your finger, and I think maybe even wedding rings that might look like tires on your physical finger.
Oh, Wesley, you are so delighted by this.
It's hilarious.
I typed it in, and I am not impressed. I'll tell you right now. I'm kind of excited about it.
I'm not having a strong emotional response to this concept. I'm not going to lie. I don't want tire rings, but I'm glad you're right.
I don't either, but come on, look at them.
Like, they exist in this world, and I had no idea. And I was like, what? People are actually doing this. It's not just like a Kickstarter. This is not like I have a wacky idea. This is like a business.
And you can save 15% with the code LOVE.
Yeah. So check it out. If you want to laugh, if you may be interested in purchasing one, check out these rings.
Okay, those look like legit tires, so I kind of a bit more, but I still really don't want one.
Like, do you get 4? Like I'm gonna stop. Rosie,
oh wow.
Are there ones for winter? All right, Rosie, what do you got?
My one feels so serious now. So I had the community creator economy as a term or a phrase that I'd love to see people talking more about. At least me personally, I hear a lot about the creator economy, but it's like, how can we talk more about the community creator economy, like how communities come together and how they create communities, how they create sustainable businesses, how they make money, and how they do great things. I'd love to hear more people thinking about that, writing about that. Over on Rosieland, one of my collaborators' friends wrote an article on that, so I'll stick a link to it. But yeah, I for me as a founder, I found it like really interesting and so much potential to kind of dive into.
That is really cool, actually. Yeah, we will definitely have the link in the show notes, so keep an eye out for that. Rosie.land. I'm assuming that's kind of your blog collection kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a community for community builders at the moment. I've been writing there for the past year or so.
Very cool. Very, very cool. And yeah, I do think it's interesting because I think a lot of people do focus on the software creators, the code creators, the hardware creators, but nobody talks about the people that are creating the community around these things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a super important conversation. And I think that brings us to the end of our episode. Rosie, thank you so much for being here. It was so awesome to get your insights and hear about what you had to say about moderation and communities and management and all that cool stuff. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, as always, to my co-host, SJ and Wesley. Thanks to Mary, who helped prepare a lot for this episode, even though she wasn't here. And as always, thanks to Jason for producing all this in the background, making us look good and doing the sliding of the tiles and all that jazz. And he will definitely be joining us for the After Pulse. Before we take off, as always, I love to stick in a little hip hop quote wherever I can. And I think this kind of fits in with our idea behind community and supporting it and moderation. So Nas, who's one of my favorite East Coast rappers of all time, probably one of the best in the game, had this to say: keep integrity at every cost. And with that, thank you very much. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
This has been Community Pulse. Learn more at communitypulse.io and on Twitter at community_pulse. Your hosts are Mary Thangvall, Mary_Grace on Twitter, Jason Hand on Twitter, PJ Haggerty, a Splenic on Twitter, SJ Morris, Sarah Jane Morris on Twitter, and Wesley Faulkner, Wesley83 on Twitter. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.